Good Thursday evening, everyone. Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted as always. I didn't do a video last night. That was my intention, was to do one. My intention is to always do them on Wednesdays and Sundays, but yesterday just wasn't feeling up to it, and took a night off. My work day is typically 9 hours long. That's how long I'm at work. And sometimes I'm just wiped yesterday. So I apologize if there was anyone going, oh, thinking I was going to go live that evening. That was my intention, but just didn't work out. The joys of having being a one-man show, as it were. This is just, no production value, and just a one-man show, more or less. And Candy the Wonder Pup is always here. And so I better get her taken care of, or she won't give me any peace. So, lie down. Speak. Make a good one. Speak. She's in a chuffing mood tonight. There you go. Candy is looked after. There's so much going on right now. It's tough to keep up with all the events that are happening in the world right now. There's a hurricane poised to anytime now. It's going to be hitting. I think it's as we speak. It's already hitting the Gulf Coast of Florida with a massive storm surge. This is what the news is reporting. Then, of course, there's what's happening in Israel, which is going to be the focus of what I'm talking on tonight. If you're paying attention on the health front, there are renewed calls for everyone to go out and roll up their sleeves and get updated flu and COVID shots, and goodness knows what else. The Trudeau government in my native Canada has survived a vote of no confidence tabled by the Conservative government, or I wish, by the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre. They put forward a motion of no confidence, which was defeated, which I don't think the Conservatives should launch a no confidence motion against the Conservatives unless they are very assured that they have the votes to defeat the government and to send Canadians to an election. Otherwise, it honestly makes the Trudeau government look good. They survived. When you put forth a motion and it fails, you look bad. What else is happening? You have the ongoing war in Ukraine and Russia, that for all intents and purposes, I think that war is over. I think that Russia has defeated the Ukrainians. That's my opinion. But I think the war is going to continue until I think the U.S. is going to continue to prop up Zelensky and avoid the inevitable being Russia's victory over the Ukraine. But they can't have that happen before the October 4th election, because that would be too bad. That would be devastating to the Kamala Harris campaign, after having invested so much political capital and real capital, billions of dollars sent to help Ukraine stave off the Russian invasion. To admit defeat at this point would be devastating. It's another, I've called it, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to equate it to another Vietnam, and which was devastating to Richard Nixon and then later to Gerald Ford when he ran for in the 1976 election, losing to Jimmy Carter. I think part of the reason he lost was that the Americans had been forced to withdraw in 1975 from the Vietnamese conflict. Better had that, from the perspective of a Republican running for re-election, an administration running for re-election, it would have been better if that hadn't happened. If the U.S. had continued the fight and had continued the propaganda and continued to claim, oh, we're doing great, everything's going swimmingly, everything's going wonderfully. And that gets to what I'm talking about tonight. And that's the propaganda that's coming out of the Israeli Hezbollah war, this war between Israel and Hezbollah, which is located in the southern portion of Lebanon. I just switched it from top chat to live chat. Danny Copeman has already chimed in, wishing everyone a good evening. He should by now have his coffee. As I've said many times, I have a brother-in-law who told me I should not use mugs on my live stream that have writing on them because it is distracting. People want to know what the mug says. So this one is for Kawartha Heights Retirement Living up in Peterborough, gives their address, phone number, and an email address if you're interested in retirement living up in Peterborough, Ontario. So there you go. If you're curious what my mug says, if I can turn it the right way, Kawartha Heights Retirement Living. Woohoo. If you're new to this station, you're welcome to hit the like button. You're welcome to subscribe. Just a Canadian voice, an old, I'll say it's become something of my tagline. I'm the living embodiment of cancel culture. I'm 58 years of age. That makes me old, and old people are supposed to sit down and shut up in today's culture, especially if you're white, which that's what I am, Caucasian, and a Christian. Well, Christians are supposed to shut up, go behind your church doors, shut up and keep quiet, talk in your church, but not out in the public square. You're not supposed to have a voice in the public discourse. So all these ticks in the boxes for being canceled in the broader discussions that take place. Male, white, Christian, old, straight, gives me no voice. But as I often say, I have a YouTube channel. I can inject my voice into the public discourse, and too bad, so sad for those who don't like it. And Danny isn't distracted by the cup. Those who come on regularly know I have a different coffee mug every night now. And he writes, Gen Xers can't keep quiet with what we see today. Yeah, I guess that's what I am, 1966. Just after the baby boomers. I almost feel like I have a foot in two camps. I actually feel like I have a foot in all camps because I learned so much from generations before me, not just from the boomers, but from my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation. So they expanded my worldview. Anyway, what's going on in terms of the propaganda? The propaganda drives me crazy because I do my best to consume content that is not, I try to get out of my echo chamber. Those who've seen me before know that I am very supportive of Israel, that I support their right to exist. I support their right to defend themselves. And so there's a ton of content that I can consume that echoes that back, that gives me back my point of view and reaffirms it. But I don't like to do that. I want to hear the opposing views. I want to hear those who think that Israel is an illegitimate state, that it is a Zionist enterprise, and that it should be wiped out. I listen to the Young Turks. I read a lot of Al Jazeera articles. I just came across one this evening earlier with the name Intifada in the title, the Intifada Report or something like that. And if you're not familiar, Intifada is an Arabic word which means uprising. And when you hear that kind of language, Intifada, and when you listen to the Young Turks and much of the coverage coming from Al Jazeera and similar like-minded points of view, typically they share this view that Israel is an illegal enterprise, that they're illegally occupying both the land of Israel as well as the occupied territories that they conquered in the 1967 Six-Day War. And the difficulty in today's world is trying to decide what is true. There's one commentator, his name is Scott Ritter. Some may be familiar. He's presented as a former U.S. intelligence officer, and he presents the view that Israel has more or less, that they've lost this war, that it's already over, that Israel has no chance, that Hezbollah could easily wipe out Israel, and that is coming, then perhaps it's only restraint that's keeping Hezbollah from unleashing holy hellfire on the nation state of Israel. And Then you listen to the news coming from the Watchman, which is a pro-Israeli outlet, or Amir Tisfardi. I have trouble pronouncing his name. Even when I hear him say it, it's hard for me to, I don't even know how it's spelled. But they're promoting this idea that Israel, that Hezbollah has already been destroyed, that they've been weakened remarkably, that so many of their rocket launchers have been destroyed, that their senior command is in disarray. And how do you know what is true? The fog of war clouds everything. And so who's winning, who's losing, what's coming up? Is Israel going to invade southern Lebanon? The talking point is that they want to push Hezbollah north of a river called the Litani River and basically give a buffer. And my own view is basically when you hear both sides reporting the same thing, then you can accept that as truth. If both those who support Hezbollah and the Israelis are saying that so many senior commanders have been killed in the upper ranks of Hezbollah. Well, Hezbollah themselves, Al Jazeera, the Young Turks, all these outlets are saying that that Hezbollah's senior command has been decimated, has been dealt severe damage. So that much is true. Israel has been very successful at infiltrating, and that's what it is in terms of this pager, walkie-talkie, these exploding lithium-ion batteries. That is obviously, to my mind, it's got to be pretty darn near 100% true, and probably north of 3,000 in Hezbollah operatives, militants, either killed or a few dozen killed and thousands more severely injured. Missing fingers, some blinded, abdominal injuries from those who had their pagers on their belts, and how this impacts Hezbollah's ability to prosecute a war against Israel. It can't be good. Does it completely incapacitate them? That might be pushing it. I've got a number of people showing up now, a number of people showing up on the live chat. Sharunian has chimed in. Saying that that New York's mayor, Eric Adams, has been indicted. As I was saying off the bat, there are so many stories dominating the news right now: a hurricane, COVID, Russia, Israel, everything, Trudeau's government surviving a no confidence motion that was put forward. So many different news stories. It's so hard to keep up with what's going on in the world. And I'm one who doesn't watch a nightly newscast. So typically what will happen is the nightly newscast is there to inform you and misinform you and tell you these are the things you're supposed to be thinking about. This is this is what you're supposed to believe about them. And this is how you're supposed to feel about them. And my basic attitude toward that is to say, I'll think about what I want to think about. I'll concern myself with what I want to be concerned with, and I'll feel about it the way that I feel about it. I'm not doing my best to be unplugged from what everyone calls the matrix. So, Danny Coleman and Sharunian, thanks for chiming in. Anyone else watching right now, you're welcome to fill that live chat. It helps. It animates me. It lets me know that I'm not just speaking into the void. But this ultimate war that is coming, there's diplomatic efforts going on as we speak that are seeking to dial down the temperature and to calm things down so that some form of a ceasefire can be arranged. The one thing is, war can move very quickly. War, all it takes is for a Hezbollah rocket missile or they have apparently fired now a ballistic missile toward what I believe is the Mossad headquarters or a Mossad facility near Tel Aviv, apparently reportedly shot down. And there's equally reporting going on right now that the Iron Dome system that typically to shoot down, from what I'm understanding, and don't quote me on any of this because misinformation is everywhere. but it's what I'm seeing reported is that a single rocket that the Iron Dome system will fire as many as 20 of their, I'll call them defender missiles, to shoot down that incoming ordnance. And that each one of these missiles coming from the Iron Dome, these defender missiles, each one costs something like $100,000 to $200,000. So for every missile that Israel shoots down, it costs them somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million. And I don't think that's unreasonable. And if you look at the thousands that have been fired at Israel since October the 8th, since Hezbollah in support of Hamas and what happened on October 7th, Hamas since that date has been firing its rockets, missiles, some drones toward northern Israel. Defending against that is very costly. And these armaments that are in the Iron Dome, these missiles, these anti-ballistic missile defense system, they have to be replenished. And does Israel, I don't know what their stockpile is, and I don't know how much it has been depleted, and I don't know, how sustainable is maintaining the Iron Dome defense system. And I have to wonder if that is playing in perhaps to Israel looking like it is going to invade northern Lebanon. Is it going to actually put boots on the ground and send troops and tanks and try to engage in more traditional warfare with Hezbollah and their militant forces? I have now Eatney has shown up, one of my favorite names. Jimmy Carter fired some 6,000 CIA agents. This is why he was not reelected. He tackled the machine big time. We have a fan of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who was president from 1976 to 1980. Actually, he became president. The way it works is you get elected Jimmy Carter would have been elected in November of 1976, but he wouldn't take the oath of office until February of 77. It's the way it always works. So he was president from 1977 to 1981. One thing that should be remembered about Jimmy Carter is his administration was in the final days of the Carter administration as Americans were getting ready to vote in 1980. Yeah, he was, I got my dates wrong. He was elected in 1976, took office in 1977, and remained in office until 1981 when Ronald Reagan took over. That year, 1980, was the year of the Islamic Revolution. That's when the the propped up American dictator, the Shah of Iran, was deposed during a revolution in Iran. And there was a famous, those my age and older will remember, that the militants, that these Islamic militants in Iran, that they overran the U.S. embassy and held, I forget how many U.S. Embassy personnel, including, if memory serves, the gentleman's name was Ken Taylor, was the ambassador to Iran, and even he was being held hostage, if I remember correctly. And they were held hostage for a protracted period of time. Canadians famously were the darlings of the American media because when the U.S. embassy was being overthrown, a number of American embassy personnel fled and were able to take refuge in the Canadian embassy. And then the Canadians did a very good job of hiding them and keeping everything quiet so that nobody knew they were there. And then slowly they were able to evacuate them by giving them fake Canadian documents. And so they were Canadians returning to Canada. And it wasn't until they had all been removed from harm's way, they'd all gotten out of Iran, and I believe Canada then shut down its embassy. And then the news came out that a number of U.S. Iranian embassy employees had been saved by the Canadians. And back then they were saying, if you were a Canadian in New York, just say you're a Canadian and the entire bar would want to buy you a drink because everyone was thrilled with how Canada had, as a nation, had stepped up. The interesting thing is that George H.W. Bush, who was Ronald Reagan's vice presidential running mate in that 1980 election, he was a former head of the CIA. And it is widely held that the Carter administration had negotiated with the Iranians for the release of the remaining American embassy employees who were still being held hostage, but that through back channels, George H.W. Bush managed to basically put that plan on hold until after the election, because the fear was that if Jimmy Carter's administration had succeeded in bringing back, in getting the hostages released from the U.S. Embassy, that it would have given him a boost. It would have been a huge PR victory for the Carter administration, and it might have been sufficient for him to be vaulted into a second term. Interesting, the way things play out historically. John 5 is here, so we've got a number of people commenting. But how do we know the difference between what is propaganda and what is truth in today's world? We cannot. I think there is a big fight coming. There are two narratives, being predominant narratives, that are dominating what I'll call the YouTube space, the alternative media space. There are individuals saying, and groups saying, that Israel has no chance, that their economy has been destroyed, and that they do not have the manpower or the military capacity to prosecute the war the way they're talking. That's one side. And the other side is saying that Hezbollah is in disarray, and that they have they're one, if you watch the Watchman News with Eric Stakelbeck, he's saying that Hezbollah is basically crying to the Iranians, saying, you have to come and rescue us. You got to save our rear ends. We're going to be destroyed. We need help. Come now. So these are the two competing narratives. And it's to be expected in war, because all sides try to, number one, they want to demoralize the enemy and make them think that they've lost. And secondly, you want to build up the morale of your own people and your own troops and your own militants. And we're winning big time. And so both sides will play at this game. The way I'm tending to look at it is there's a big fight coming, that Hezbollah, they have suffered setbacks, certainly the pager attack. My big question is, yes, Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets, missiles, underground, ready to be fired at Israel, but do they have the launch capacity? Do they have launchers? Because having the missile is great, but you need the launch capability to send it at your enemy. And Israel has reportedly been targeting these launch facilities. I liken it to, I've got 1,000 rounds of ammunition. I've got 500 mags filled with 30 bullets each. I got 30 rounds of ammunition in hundreds of mags. But if I don't have a rifle to deliver them, what am I going to do? Throw mags? You need a delivery system. How many rocket launchers does Hezbollah have, and how many have they lost? Big question, because that seems to be the major component of their offensive capability, is this huge stockpile of missiles and rockets that they can lob into Israel. But if they don't have the launching capability, well, makes them something of a paper lion. Going to read up. John is saying loads of war talk is happening. Yes, there is loads of war talk happening. And I've been saying it since the very beginning, since October 8th, 9th, 10th, that the dominoes start to fall. And we've already seen some of the dominoes falling. Some of those dominoes have been Hamas was attacked initially. Hamas launched their attack against Israel on October 7th, and that Israel responded to it. But October 8th, then one domino fell. Hezbollah in Lebanon started firing rockets into northern Israel, resulting in the evacuation of about 60,000. That's the number most widely reported. 60,000 Israelis have been forced to abandon their homes, their schools, their businesses. Northern Israel is a ghost town within a certain distance of the Lebanese border. They can't go home. They've been living in hotels, largely in Tel Aviv, for almost a year now. They can't go home because too many rockets are coming across, too many missiles. And so there was one domino. Then we had the Houthis down in Yemen. They have started attacking shipping in the Red Sea, targeting initially, they said they would be targeting Israeli shipping, but it's expanded beyond that. There was an oil tanker that was recently hit, and U.S. warships have also come under attack by drones and missiles. And the Houthis have also been said to have launched a missile missile at Israel that travels at hypersonic speed, that is to say, faster than the speed of sound. So they're and of course, who supports, who props up Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. All three are financed, supported, trained, everything from Iran. And Iran, back some months ago, they themselves, from their own soil, for the first time in history, launched somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 rockets, drones, and missiles at Israel, 99% or so of which were shot down. But you have to wonder, sounds great that you shot them down, but every time something like that happens, Iran learns. Part of when you're in a boxing match, part of the purpose of a jab is to see how your opponent responds to the jab, how they defend, so that you can plan your next attack. And you might want to look at those 300 rockets, drones, and missiles that were lobbed some months ago from Iranian soil. Now the Iranians have a better idea as to Israel's defensive capabilities and how they respond, and they can plan accordingly. It's war. And one thing you should never do is to diminish the capabilities of your opponent, never underestimate your opponent. It's one thing, there's the rhetoric that comes out, and both sides paint the other side as being barbaric and inhuman and et cetera, et cetera. That's rhetoric. But at the end of the day, at the most senior levels, both on the Iranian side and on the Israeli side, I think that both sides respect the ability and the capabilities of the other. I'm going to catch up. Eat Me says, we cannot even be sure about the written history. Winners are, the history is written by the winners, is the frequently used bromide. Although, for what it's worth, when you pick up this book, the Bible, so often it's the Israelites losing. And they wrote their history when they were conquered by the Assyrians, when they were conquered by the Babylonians, when they were conquered by the Greeks, conquered by the Romans. The history of this particular region, this Holy Land, is one of conquest. Seldom has it been, over the course of its entire history, seldom has this little strip of land along the Mediterranean coast, seldom has it been ruled by the people actually living there. Typically, it's a colonial power who imposes its rule over the region. And that goes from Babylon to the Medo-Persian Empire, which is Iran, Medo-Persia, to the Greeks, Alexander the Great, and then that empire broke up and they were ruled by the Seleucid Empire. Then there was a brief period, 60, 70 years, when the Jews living in the Holy Land got something of autonomous rule. They were ruling themselves, but that didn't last long because then the Roman Empire came in. And after the Roman Empire came in, after the dissolution of the Roman Empire, when the Roman Empire split in two, this little strip of land was ruled by the Byzantine Empire. And then after the Byzantines, goodness, then it was the Arabians from the Arabian Peninsula, under this new religion called Islam. They came in and they ruled the area, but they didn't maintain control of it forever because there were a couple periods where the European Christian Crusaders came and they gained rule over it. And then for a time, it was ruled from Egypt as part of the Mamluk Empire. They got control of it. And then the Ottomans from Turkey, they got control of it. And the Ottomans lost it to Britain, and Britain got control of it. So it's typically been a colonial holding of one world empire or another. It was only in 1948-49, after that war, that Jewish Palestinians gained control of it after fighting a nearly year-long war against armies from the what's called the Arab League. Basically five countries sent armed troops to conquer what had been the British mandate for Palestine. And they got some. The Egyptians took some. They got the Gaza Strip. That had been part of the British mandate, and Egypt captured that. And the West Bank, which again had been part of the mandate, was captured by the Jordanians, and the Jordanians also got East Jerusalem. So, and they didn't create a Palestinian state. They just incorporated, this is ours now, new territory for us. And everything, the rest of it, fell to the Jewish Palestinians, and they created a nation state called Israel. That's all just basic history that you can verify very simply. I have John 5 writing, is Putin, is he bluffing? Bluffing about what? My own personal view is that Putin, I always have trouble. If you're Canadian, we have this cheese curds gravy on French fries called poutine, and then there's Vladimir Putin. And there's a tendency for me to want to, when I'm saying Putin, I want to say poutine. Miss Helith Razor is here, MHR. Haven't seen you for a bit. Good to have you back. What's going to happen? Just getting on to John 5's question. My personal belief is that once the November 4th election is over, Ukraine will come to they'll basically surrender to the Russians, and that war will be over. The big thing is Putin does not want NATO on his doorstep. He doesn't want a competing world power right on his borders, which is what Ukraine wanted to do. Ukraine wanted to join in with NATO. And it was those overtures putting what Putin views as a threatening force right on his southern border that prompted, that's my belief, that's what prompted the war. There's a lot of rhetoric about the fact that Putin said he was fighting against Nazi-style elements within the Ukrainian military, and there's some legitimacy to that because there is a unit. It was written of in CBC News. Canadian Armed Forces had sent training and equipment to the Ukrainian military, and the CBC News was reporting, and asking, should Canada be sending military support to a regime that has this prominent unit that venerates Adolf Hitler and has SS symbols on their uniforms, and they venerate Adolf Hitler. And we all saw famously how Canada's parliament gave a standing ovation to a Ukrainian who fought alongside of the Nazis. So there is an element of truth to those claims by Vladimir Putin and the Russians that there is a Nazi element within Ukraine, but ultimately I don't think that was the objective of his invasion of Ukraine. I think the ultimate objective was to ensure Russian security from NATO influence and not wanting to have NATO right on its doorstep, similar in a fashion to the way that when the Russians, when it was the old Soviet Union, they went and cozied up with the Cubans under Castro and were threatening and were building missile silos on the island of Cuba, which is 90 or so miles away from Florida, from mainland United States. And the Kennedy administration was having none of it. And they put a blockade of ships, a naval blockade around Cuba. And the world was very close to World War III at that point. Many people say, we were 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock during what was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. We're at a similar inflection point now, I believe, with what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Although, like I say, I think that war is over. Ukraine has lost. They're just hanging on, and the U.S. is going to keep propping them up until after the November 4 election to, make the pending, and I'm going to say it, I think Kamala Harris is going to win that election, whether legitimately or otherwise. She is going to win. They will move heaven and earth to keep her, in power, because she's the vice president now. And we all know that Joe Biden just signs whatever they put in front of him, and he says whatever they put on the teleprompter, and they beg him not to go off the teleprompter because he goes completely off the rails. Well, they want to keep that in place. And so Kamala Harris is going to win, legitimately or otherwise. And they just will need to create the conditions so that it's believable that she won. I've got Danny commenting on poutine because he lives in Montreal, and Quebec is where poutine came from. In French, fries, gravy, cheese curd dish, and Russian president's last name are pronounced the same way. Oh, in French. Okay. Poutine. N'importe un les deux, either one of the two, when you're speaking French. Vladimir Putin, Putin. No, I don't think they are. I think in French you would say Vladimir Putin, which sounds like another word, which I'm not going to say. You know the word, Danny. A certain type of woman. There's a word for French. Anyway, I've got John writing, Azov, Black Sun. You're going to have to help me out with that one. I'm not familiar. Sounds vaguely familiar. Azov, is that a group? Is that the unit, the Azov Brigade within the Ukrainian military? I think that's what it is. Things, that was a while ago that I read about this unit. And it was a CBC, it was mainstream right out there in front. This before the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, that the Ukrainian military had elements that are very ideologically oriented toward the Nazis. And that was mainstream, but it became a conspiracy theory after the Russians started using it as justification for their war, their invasion of Ukraine. Then it became a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. There are elements within the Ukrainian military that very much venerate the Nazis and Adolf Hitler. And was that the justification for Vladimir Putin going in and invading? I don't think so. I think that was an excuse. But he was not lying. Danny's writing that Kamala will steal the election. She's not smart enough to steal the election. Come on, Danny. she in of herself can't steal the election. Those who want her in, the powers behind the curtain, will do whatever it takes. And I've said it before, and I'll repeat it. What I think is going to happen is that in mid-October, so not too far away, I think Joe Biden will be vacating the presidency in one way or another, and that Kamala will be taking the oath of office, and then she will be running on November 4th as the incumbent president of the United States. And I expect, 2-3 weeks of gushing coverage about the United States having its first female head of state, first female of color. The DEI boxes are all being ticked. And I expect the mainstream media to go full lovin' on Kamala Harris and use that as justification. Well, it's not surprising she got this huge bump and was able to win. Miss Helleth Razor is laughing over something. John 5, is there a chance wars can stop if Kamala wins? Actually, no, I don't. I think the war in Russia will end, the war between Russia and Ukraine, but this war that's happening between Israel and this axis of resistance, this ring of fire, my expectation is it's going to continue to build and blow up. The president of Turkey, Erdogan, however you pronounce his name, was just gave an address to the UN General Assembly, and he was amping up the rhetoric on steroids in terms of, talking about the quote unquote genocide taking place in Gaza, the number of children, and he told horrific tales of a young girl whose entire family was wiped out and waited 2 weeks for rescue, and these heartless, barbaric, evil, Israelis and what they're doing, and it's genocide and the whole bit. What I would wonder is, since 2014, 2015, there has been a horrible civil war raging in Yemen. And in that country, hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, either as a direct result of the fighting or because of humanitarian reasons, starving to death, unable to access even the most basic medical care. And it's resulted in tens of thousands of children, probably 100,000 plus kids under the age of 5 have been killed as a result of this conflict. Did Erdogan ever say anything about those kids? Of course, and I don't believe he has, because when it's Arab on Arab, Islamic on Islamic violence, well, that's okay. We're allowed to kill each other. But if Hamas launches a brutal terrorist-style attack on the nation-state of Israel, kidnaps babies, infants were kidnapped and taken into the Gaza Strip and taken down into this tunnel network of theirs. And how is Israel supposed to respond? And there's no good answer, sadly. There is no good answer, because Hamas, their 1988 covenant of Hamas, where they lay out their raison d'etre, we exist, the goal, this is why we are here. Our goal is to eliminate the nation state of Israel from existence, to end this illegal Zionist enterprise that stole Palestinian land, which it wasn't Palestinian land, it was British land. Before that, it was Ottoman land. Before that, it was Egyptian Mamluk land. For a couple brief periods, for a few years, it was European Christian Crusader land. It was Byzantine land. It was Roman land. There was never a Palestinian land. But I mean, historical facts don't matter when emotion takes hold. And emotionally, the Palestinian cause, the PLO and Hamas and Hezbollah and these groups have done a fantastic job on the propaganda front in portraying the Israelis as the illegal occupiers, as these European Jews who came in and stole the land from the Palestinian people. And that's the narrative that is promulgated. That is the narrative that is believed, and it resonates on an emotional level. And once you engage someone at an emotional level, it's hard to engage them at an intellectual level and to get people to look at the basic history, because the history doesn't matter, because unless it lines up with the way I feel. We saw this during the COVID era. You can present to people all the facts about masking and about, you can show them the studies that were done, published to the British Medical Journal, about how masks, you increase wearing a mask for hours on end increases your risk of developing a respiratory infection. You can show them these studies, and you can show them the CDC saying that medical masks, those blue type with the little folds, how they were never designed to stop the spread of a viral pathogen, that they were to prevent bodily fluids from spraying into people's mouths and to prevent spittle from falling into an open gaping wound. Someone has their chest cavity open. You don't want scalpel, and you don't want the spit falling into an open wound. That's what the masks were. You can show them all this, but it doesn't matter because emotionally people are scared of SARS-CoV-2, scared of getting infected, think that if they get an infection that there's a good chance they'll be on a ventilator in an induced coma. So they're frightened emotionally. And so the facts don't matter. And it's the same thing with this Israeli Palestinian conflict. People see the images of what's happening in Gaza or now in Lebanon, and it is brutal. War is ugly. Bad things happen. And the facts don't matter. People get emotionally triggered. That's another big word today. Miss Hellithraiser hopes that I am wrong. I assume you hope I'm wrong about the escalation that's coming. I hope I'm wrong too. I hope things calm down. But ultimately, even if things do calm down, if Israel was to declare and agree to a ceasefire both on the northern border with Lebanon and in Gaza, if a ceasefire was agreed to, what's going to happen in that case is that Hamas survives. They're going to reorganize, rearm, and plan for the next attack, because their ultimate goal of wiping Israel off the map hasn't changed. And likewise with Hezbollah, they can then replace the launch capabilities that Israel has destroyed, and they can build up. And Iran, which is the ultimate power behind everything, they can continue on their nuclear program. And goodness knows where that will end up. Because Iran, if you go to Tehran, you can check this out yourselves, in kind of the Nathan Phillips Square, the Times Square, the Trafalgar Square, the main city square in Tehran, they have a clock, a countdown clock. And the countdown clock is counting down to the year 2040. And that is their end date for the nation state of Israel. Sometime in the next 15, 16 years, they want Israel destroyed, wiped off the map, no longer existing. And they'll just, that if they can get a pause, now we have Israel prosecuting the war seemingly to the max extent. And are they going to send troops in? I think they pretty much, if they want to wipe out Hezbollah, if they want to ensure their security, and if they want the citizens of their northern part of their country, if they want these 60,000 odd Israelis to be able to return home, to start reopening their businesses, going back to school in that northern part of the country, that they have to create this buffer zone so that Hezbollah can no longer attack them. And I just wonder at what point would a country like, say, the United States, how they would react if there was a belligerent force in Cuba lobbing missiles, and if the entire state of Florida had to be evacuated. And would they just, oh, well, that's just the way it is, just accept it and leave Florida vacant? Or at some point would the United States do whatever it took to ensure that its residents from the state of Florida could return to the state of Florida? I think there's a double standard. I think people expect Israel to just accept the fact that Hezbollah is going to continue to lob these missiles, these drones, these rockets toward their territory in the north, and that they're just supposed to say, oh, well, too bad, so sad. You 60,000 people, we're just going to have to relocate you, and this will be an uninhabitable portion of our little tiny country that's about the size of the state of New Jersey. And we'll just have to relocate you. Maybe we'll put you in the Negev desert, for goodness sakes. Danny Coleman is writing, if Trump was in power, Israel and Ukraine never would have happened. It's impossible to say. It's impossible to say, but I don't think so either. I think that Trump had a working relationship with Putin, and that it was under the Trump administration that they signed something called the Abraham Accords, where Israel was able to normalize relations with the United Arab Emirates, with Morocco, with elements within the Islamic world. And as his administration came to an end after what happened in 2020, when all of a sudden a whole millions of mail-in ballots came in and just flipped the results in every key battleground state and flipped them from Trump to Biden. Well, during that time, the Israelis were looking to bring this Abraham Accord. They were looking to bring in the Saudis, bring them on board as well. And that would have been massive, and it would have been a huge blow to Iran, because within the Islamic world, as I understand it, the Iranians want to be the champions of the Islamic world. So do the Saudis. So do the Egyptians. There are different groups within the Islamic world. So does Turkey. Now, when you think about it, within the Islamic world, Persia used to be a world empire. The Ottomans used to be a world empire. The Egyptians used to be a major world empire. The Saudis had a major empire as well. So and these are all differing people. The Egyptians are Africans, North Africans, if you will, but they're one colonial group. The Saudis from the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, or the Arabian Peninsula to be more accurate, they're, a people. The Persians are another people. The Turks are another people. I find it ironic. And to me, I just put it down to Jew hatred of all things Jewish, Jews and all things Jewish, that it's okay for Ottoman Turks to dominate the Holy Land. That's okay. That's okay. You can have a colonial power dominating this little strip of land if it's the Ottoman Turks, if it's the Egyptian Mamluks, if it's the Arabians and during their empire, or the Persians. Any group can dominate this region so long as it's not Jewish. Don't let the Jews can't dominate this region because, well, they're European Jewry, and European Jewry can't dominate this region. They should go back to Europe. Well, why don't the Ottomans go back to Turkey? Why don't the Egyptians go back to Egypt? Why don't the Arabians go back to the Arabian Peninsula? Why don't the Persians stick to Persia? Why is it only a problem? Why is colonial rule over this area only a problem when it's Jewish rule? That's an open-ended question. And I ask it all the time when I get into debates with people, and I do regularly over this issue, because most people are not informed about it. They don't know the history at all. They just know their emotional reaction based on TikTok videos and Instagram posts that they've seen, and what comes across on the nightly news with their bias. Just going to read on. Miss Heleth Razier writes, I'm hoping Trump wins. Do you think Pierre will be Prime Minister of Canada? There's the one thing. Our Canadian electoral system is superior to the American federal electoral system. I love the United States, spent 10 years growing up there, New York, New Jersey, and Oregon. But the manner in which their voting takes place, it's different in every state. In some states, it's touchscreen voting. In some states, it's a paper ballot. In some states, it's a machine with a lever. Other states, you're scanning your vote in. Each state has their own electoral commission that administers the vote and does the counting. It's done differently in every single state. Whereas in Canada, we have, at the federal level, we have Elections Canada. And, you have that yellow sign, says Elections Canada, yellow and black, and it usually has a circle with an X in it. And that indicates a polling station. And you go in and there are cardboard boxes. You go into one polling station, might be a school, a community center, church basement, whatever it is. And there'll be 10 or 15 ballot boxes, each one with a number, given a poll number, poll 10, You know, get poll 10 to 25 in a school gymnasium, and you walk in, and based on your address, they tell you which poll you are, and you are in poll 22. And there's box 22, and they give you your ballot. You mark an X and you put it into that box, and then you leave. And at the end of the night, then in turn, at that polling station, one by one, the boxes are opened up, and each candidate can have a scrutineer there witnessing and observing the vote to make sure that everything is above board. And I think our elections work and that they are fair, and that the potential to cheat in turn on the actual, just the counting of the ballots, is nigh on impossible. In the United States, where the manner in which they're counting things, especially when it's done by Diebold or Diebold computer systems and that, and it's all, you know, all you have to do is insert a computer virus, a bug, into the voting machines, which are all linked. They're all connected. They're part of a network. I think it was Princeton University went on to ABC, NBC, Fox, and went on to all the major news networks, showing how easily it was to hack into these touchscreen voting machines. And they showed how you could flip the results. So I think it just, I think for Trump to win, it has to be a tsunami. He has to overwhelmingly win, so that it's impossible for, during the COVID election of 2020, they primed the population and said, you know, because of the mail-in ballots, because everyone's afraid to go outside because of COVID, that, and they primed the population to say that a large percentage of the mail-in ballots are expected to be for Biden. To me, I thought, and I still think, that was bogus. That there were, it wasn't the prime differentiator on whether someone was afraid of COVID or wasn't afraid of COVID, did not fall along political lines. It fell along age lines. Elderly people, 60, 70, 80 years of age, were far more afraid of COVID than 20s, 30s, 40-year-olds. I was 50-year-old. I wasn't afraid of it, but I'm a bit of an anomaly. So to answer your question, Miss Helith Razor, I don't think they can cheat the Conservatives in Canada out of the winning a majority as things stand right now. The only qualifier I would put in there is if, amazingly, Justin Trudeau were to resign and to leave, and if they replaced him with Mark Carney, I think that could tilt the results. And I could see potentially Mark Carney reviving Liberal fortunes enough to either have them maintain a minority themselves, or to at least knock the Conservatives down into minority territory. And it's important for the Conservatives, for them to govern effectively, they really need a majority, because they don't have a logical dance partner that will support them up the way the NDP had this supply side confidence agreement with the Liberals. The Conservative Party, the only party with which they're somewhat ideologically aligned, is the People's Party of Canada. But the People's Party of Canada probably will not elect one single member in this coming parliament. So they got to look to the NDP, the Greens. The Bloc Québécois is the one that maybe they could make a deal with, maybe. But Quebec politics tends so much toward the progressive that it's difficult. Anyway, so I do think, as things stand right now, I think it's a slam dunk that Pierre Poilievre is going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Danny Copeman writes, Biden and Trudeau need to be replaced by Trump and Poilievre if we stand any chance of saving Canada and the U.S. Yeah, and in terms of Poilievre, I do tend to think he's bought and paid for as well. I just think he's a better option than Trudeau. But ultimately, the most telling aspect with Poilievre was when he was running for leadership of the Conservative Party, after Aaron O'Toole stepped down. someone came up to him on one of his little photo ops and asked him to comment on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and Pierre Poilievre said he'd never heard of them. He wasn't familiar with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And watching that little clip, my head just about exploded. I'm like, what? You want to be the leader of the Canada's, a major political party in Canada? Liberals and Conservatives are the only two parties that have ever gained power in our parliaments. You want to lead the Conservative Party of Canada, and you're claiming you've never heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Justin Trudeau is the chairman of promoting the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, and you're saying you never heard of it? Come on, Poilievre, give me a break. But regardless, Eat Me writes, wasn't Hamas created by the French and the US to tackle the PLO? Actually, yes. And it wasn't created so much by, and actually it's the Israelis themselves, promoted Hamas within the Gaza Strip to counterbalance the PLO. I think the Hamas sprang out of something called the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Israelis, I think it is credible to say that the Israelis themselves propped them up, because it's that old adage of a house divided against itself cannot stand. So you have Hamas and the PLO kind of fighting amongst each other, and the PLO was strong and Hamas was somewhat weak at that point. So Israel built Hamas up to a house divided. And eventually, though, the PLO faded into nothing, and Hamas, after something of an internal civil war within the Gaza Strip itself, asserted itself and became the de facto dictators of the Gaza Strip. They were elected, I think it was in 2008. I might be off on my year, but I'm not off by much, 2 or 3 years at most. Sometime between 2006, 2008, somewhere right in that area, Hamas was elected, but they have not allowed a single election since that time. They've ruled as dictators of the Gaza Strip, and supported by Iran, they've been able to build an enormous, massive tunnel network, and it connects them through this Philadelphia corridor with Egypt, and they've been able to bring in all kinds of rocket launchers, RPGs, rocket propelled grenades, and military equipment in. And there was a woman, an old woman in Gaza, being interviewed by Al Jazeera, nonetheless. This was Al Jazeera, and she was saying in Arabic that they were talking about the aid that comes in, UN type aid that comes into the Gaza Strip. And she said it all goes straight down into the tunnels. Hamas takes all the aid. They take everything of quality and they take it, and we don't see anything. And she said, and some people started to rebuke her, and she goes, I don't care. I'll speak the truth. I'm old. They can do whatever they want to me. And then they shut the interview down. And that was on Al Jazeera. You can find it still here on YouTube if you search it out. And they are, Hamas is a bully organization with one goal, and their stated objective, the 1988 Covenant of Hamas, from the river to the sea. We are going to wipe Israel off the map, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. Actually, when I show that on my screen, it's backwards because my right is left and everything's reversed. So from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. They want to wipe Israel off the map. That is their goal. That is their objective. And it's the same with Hezbollah. The Houthis are a bit of a different situation. The Houthis were propped up by Iran to overthrow the Saudi-backed government in Yemen and to spread Iran's version, their style, their Shia extremist Islamic ideology beyond Iran. Within Islam itself, there are two predominating, they're not the only two, but the predominant groups. It's like in Christianity, we have two predominant groups. We have Catholicism and Protestantism. But then there's also Eastern Orthodox, and there's some other marginal, smaller groups too. Well, within Islam, it's the Sunni and the Shia, and those are the two primary groups. And from what I understand, and I may get them confused, but one group believes that after Muhammad's death, that the religious authority should have followed bloodlines. It should have followed Muhammad's blood relatives, should have been the senior leaders of the Islamic movement. And another group believes that it's based on spiritualism, that it doesn't matter what your bloodlines are. And I believe that the Shia are those who believe it should follow Muhammad's bloodlines, but I may be wrong. I've got to double check that. Maybe someone wants to double check it for me. But it all comes down to who has the authority. And to a degree, it's the way that Christianity kind of broke down in the 1500s. There were those who fully recognized papal authority and that Rome was the power. And there were other individuals who said, no, each individual, you don't have to go through your priest and your bishop and the cardinal and the pope. There isn't this chain. God doesn't have a chain of command. But in the Catholic worldview, there is. God has established a chain of command, and the Pope is the supreme authority. After the Pope comes the Cardinal, after the Cardinal, the Bishop, after the Bishop, your local priest, and then below the priest, you have another layer, these brotherly and sisterly orders. So it makes for a mess. And you can look at the 30 Years' War that took place in Europe in the 1500s, from the late 1400s to the early 1500s. There was a 30-year war. England, after King Henry VIII and Elizabeth and Mary, Queen of Scots, and Bloody Mary, and this fight over Protestant Catholic, and the Spanish Armada, and the Spanish who were papists coming up to attack England, and the Netherlands got involved too. The 30 Years' War is a fascinating time of religious upheaval in the Christian faith. And interestingly, it should be noted that Islam is the youngest. It's called, these are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are called the Abrahamic faiths because all claim Abraham as a common ancestor. Man, I'm getting into religious history here. But Abraham, the three faiths are Abrahamic. The oldest, of course, is Judaism. Then around Jesus came into the world, crucified in 33 AD. And then it was in the 700s or 800s that Islam under Muhammad came along. So it's a much younger religion than even Christianity. And so, Christians, we need to look at the log in our own eye, and we say, look at this fighting between the Shia and the Sunni and everything. We went through the same thing. Things have calmed down. Protestant and Catholic tend to get along reasonably well now, but go back to the 1500s and we were killing the crap out of each other. And even more recently in places like Belfast, Ireland. Anyway, let's read on. Danny writes, okay, I'm down to eat me. Wasn't Hamas created? I read that. Danny Copeman believes that Pierre Poilievre is our version of Trump, kinda. That's fair enough. That's the way the liberals want to paint. Poilievre as Trump light. I think that's their modus operandi for winning an upcoming election, because a lot of Canadians, even those who like Trump, there are aspects of Trump's character, which I think most people, there are individuals who support Trump who go, I don't really like him. And I'm somewhat in that camp. I think Trump is the best choice for Americans, but would I want the man living next door to me? No, I would not. I think he was a DICK. I'm just going to read up on the last few comments and then wrap this up because I've been going on for over an hour now. Danny writes, Hamas was created by the Israeli military-industrial complex. As I say, I don't think they were created by them, but at the same time, without the support of, you want to call it the military-industrial complex of Israel, fair enough. Without their support, they probably would have dissipated into nothing. They sprang out of the old Muslim Brotherhood. And Danny's going on about masks, about their, look at a virus, the holes, how big the holes are in your mask. What I say to people who wear a mask is, would you wear that thing down in a coal mine? And most will say, well, no, of course not. And so, well, viral aerosols are smaller than coal dust. So if it's not going to stop coal dust, how in the heck is it ever going to stop a viral pathogen? Good luck. But it doesn't matter. Facts don't matter. Feelings are more important, and they feel safer wearing it. John writes, other than religion, they're fighting for resources and territory, and he puts a question mark there. Well, in terms of the Gaza Strip, it is widely reported that out in the Mediterranean, off the coast of the Gaza Strip, that they have found I believe it's natural gas deposits that could be exploited. And I doubt Hamas is interested in exploiting them. I think Hamas, their primary goal is getting rid of Israel first. And then if they were able to achieve their objective of wiping Israel off the map, then I have no doubt that they would look to exploit those resources in the Mediterranean. But there's always a financial aspect to war. But in this case, I think I think for a large part of the Islamic world, they cannot countenance the existence of a Jewish nation state right in their midst, even one that's so tiny, even just these 8 or 9 to 10 million. It's only about 7 million of whom are Jews. The rest are either Muslims or Druze or Christians. Israel's population, I think, is about 9.7 million people, roughly, and about 2 million of those Israeli citizens are either Islamic, that's most of the 2 million are Islamic, with a few Druze and maybe 30,000 to 50,000 Christians, many of whom are what are called Messianic Jews who maintain their Jewish identity, maintain Jewish traditions, maintain Jewish cultural practices, while at the same time acknowledging Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. Danny, just masks are useless. Amen. You're preaching to the choir. I hope most here. If they bring back masks, I'm not going to. I've shown before my mingle mask, the little plastic thing that I wore. I won't even wear that. I will push back big time. Hey, Jason King made it. And saying he's gone through a long day and he's just listening. Hey, all good. Whale oil beef. Is asking, doesn't Canada use the Dominion machines? We do at Ontario provincial elections, but not at the federal level. Getting back to the Canadian political and the way we count votes. Federally, it is still cardboard boxes with a paper ballot, federally. In Ontario, we use a scan ballot system, and that is Dominion. I don't know about how the other provinces do, but I'm talking about at the federal level. So every province has elections Ontario, elections New Brunswick, elections Quebec. You got different, and those are they regulate provincial elections, but federal elections are regulated by Elections Canada. And as things stand in Canada, we still use a paper ballot, mark your X, put it in the cardboard box, and then it's counted out by hand. So, no, Canada doesn't use Dominion voting machines, but Ontario, which is a province in Canada, does. Danny writes, and this is great, I put my trust in God, not man's scientism. Let God be true, all men liars. Put your faith in this book, the Bible. Doesn't say it on the front, it says it on the spine. The Oxford Annotated Bible, complete with Apocrypha. That's the Bible I got in university. Miss Hellithraser, MHR, is worried about the election coming up here in Canada. I'm not going to worry about it until it's on the doorstep, and there isn't one on the doorstep now. And I hope that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives don't launch another motion of no confidence unless they're confident that they have the support of both the NDP and the Bloc. They need both of those. They need both the Bloc Québécois and the NDP to vote in favor of no confidence. If they don't have them on side, if they know that the one or both of them is going to support the Liberals, then don't even put the motion forward. Wait until you've got the support, because otherwise, honestly, it helps Trudeau a bit. He looks better. He's defeating. He's winning the vote, and Poilievre and the Conservatives are losing the vote. Miss Hellithraser is of the opinion that Mark Carney would be worse than Justin Trudeau, and I happen to agree. But I also think he would do better than Trudeau does, because Trudeau's an idiot. So I'm just trying to catch up. Danny Coleman writes, we really need Maxime Bernier at the helm, but it won't happen, not yet anyways, and he's getting old. Yeah. He's got this election, maybe one more. And then is there any heir apparent to the PPC? Or is that party just, a one-man show? And I think right now, as it stands, it's a one-man show. Miss Christie is shown up, ruled by dictators just like us in Canada. And Stanley Paul Delorme has shown up. Danny Copeman saying the Pope is now calling for one world religion. Absolutely blasphemous, if you ask me. The Pope is no longer to be trusted. He is bought by the evilness. Have you seen the Viper Room at the Vatican? I've never been to the Vatican, and I haven't seen it even in a video or anything like that. But we've all seen what Rome is all into, relativism. Rome is all about power, about earthly power on this temporal plane. And that's why Constantine adopted and co-opted and took over and created. Under Constantine, the Christian faith was made Roman. The Roman system that's how they organized the Christian faith. Rather than aligning Roman society, the Roman world, with the Christian faith, they did it the wrong way. They said, what can we do to this Christian faith to make it more Roman in nature? No. You're supposed to take the Christian faith and use it to reform and make Rome Christian. And that's where I talk about, Jesus says, if you want to be first, you have to be last. If you want to lead, you have to follow. Pope, cardinals, bishops, priests, brotherly, sisterly orders, and the laity. That's a very Roman structure. Jesus flipped it upside down. So if you want to lead, you have to be a follower. If you want to be first, you have to be last. And that's not a Roman system. I do not have an issue with individual Roman Catholics. There are some amazing Roman Catholics who are very devout, who know their Bibles, who are very humble, who have no problem submitting to the authority within their church structure, but they do it out of humble submission, which is something the Bible also speaks of. Humble submission to those in positions of authority. So I don't have a problem with individual Roman Catholics. What I have a problem with is Rome itself and the Pope in particular, and the entire way that the Romans organized the Christian faith. I don't think it's Christian at all. But at the core of it, if you get into this book and you read this word, and according to Rome, the papal authority is superior to what's written in this book. They do not believe in sola scriptura. They do not believe in the five solas. Salvation alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, by grace alone. They don't believe in that. It's based on their authority. Hence why you have to, when you die, you need the last rites. You need their authoritative say so. Anyway. Stanley Paul Delorme thinks that Mad Max is our version of Trump. The unfortunate thing for Maxime Bernier is his English is not the greatest. It's okay. It's pretty good. But he cannot he cannot connect with people on an emotional level in English. He can do it in French. But the problem is Quebec as a society is so progressively far left that his message would resonate in English Canada if he could deliver it better. I actually met Maxime Bernier one time. He did a rally out in Napanee, Ontario, which isn't far from me, 40 minutes or so. So I went out to meet him. And, you know, he's from La Beauce. He's very much a Quebecer. And unfortunately, he doesn't stand a snowball's chance in this coming election. And that's just reality. And I voted PPC in the last two elections, to be perfectly clear. Oh, Eat Me is talking about this 30 years war, and he's talking about Nuit de la Saint-Barthélemy in Paris, a massacre of the French Protestants. You can read up on that. The Huguenots, Huguenots, the French Protestants were absolutely massacred. There was also the Chevalier Cathar, the Cathilerian Knights, which was a Protestant-style order within France. And that 30-year war period was brutal for Protestants in France. You fared far better as a Protestant in the Netherlands or England, but France, they got crushed. Danny Coleman says in the Bible, it says stars will fall. Hollywood is crumbling. Was stars a metaphor for famous people in entertainment? Honestly, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, there's a Simpsons episode where Homer is predicting the rapture and the apocalypse and everything. And he gives a specific date, and he talks about the stars falling in a blimp with all of Springfield's celebrities. Kent Brockman, Rainier Wolfcastle, and all the rest are up in Krusty the Clown are up in a blimp, and the stars start falling to the ground. And Homer's like, "Hey, see, I told you." I don't think it's personally, I don't think it's metaphorical. I think it's the stars in the sky that we're going to see them fall. Danny Coleman's right. Yeah, we have now crossed into Friday. It is now Friday the 27th. And oh my goodness. Okay, I'm almost to the end of the messages. Yes, Willow Beef is just commenting on Dominion voting system, and it is a Canadian company. Danny writes, my favorite words, Jesus is King. Yeah, and there's a vote coming up. The BC is going to a provincial election. We'll see how that pans out. I did a video on it just a couple nights ago. We'll see. That's October what? I had it written down there. October 19th. Weird day because it's a Saturday, but that's the date of the British Columbia provincial election, and it's a binary election between the NDP and the Conservatives. And the Greens might elect a seat or two, but pretty much it's right and left. It's very cut and dried, and it's 99.9% certain one or the other will win a majority. But still a lot of time to go. 2 weeks in politics, provincial or federal, is a lifetime. Anyway. Mish Christie writes, I don't understand how NDP and Bloc still have confidence in Libs after the latest scandal. It's not so much that they have confidence in them. It's a matter of what are their chances of winning in an election if an election was to be held in a month or so. And right now they're afraid also of being steamrolled by the Conservatives, that they would lose seats to the Conservatives. The Bloc Québécois should be less concerned. The Bloc Québécois, because the Conservative Party isn't that strong in the province of Quebec, the Bloc Québécois should be looking, I think, to topple the Liberals because they're polling very strongly. A lot of Quebecers, when they don't like the Liberals, that now they flip to the Bloc Québécois. But the NDP they just held a seat out in Winnipeg area about a week ago during that same night that Trudeau, the Liberals, lost their Montreal area riding. But the NDP didn't win by a lot over the Conservative. And in a federal election, they might lose that seat to the Conservatives. So I don't think it's that they have confidence in Trudeau. I think they're just looking after their own electoral chances in a coming election. TJ is here writing that the Second Vatican Council likely overthrew classic Catholicism. Danny Coleman wrote, Google Vatican Viper Room in images. Scary looking. I'm going to write that down, and I'll do that as soon as we're done. So it's Vatican Viper Room. And, of course, the pen I picked doesn't work. Vatican, this one does. Viper. Okay, I'll look it up. Cryptomeria has shown up and is writing, as long as we don't get an earthquake tax, they'll tax anything. Whale Beef is writing that Ebby or Evie or however that name is pronounced, he's the premier of New Brunswick, or no, New Brunswick, the premier of British Columbia. I'm getting tired. Time for me to sign out. TJ's writing that this Viper Room is even scarier than Johnny Depp's Viper Room. All right. Looks like I've caught up on all the messages. I've gone on for nearly an hour and a half. This is one of the longest videos I've done. Thank you all for watching. We'll see what happens with the war in Israel as we go to bed, like at this time. Right now, it's 7:43. It's coming up on 8 a.m. in Israel as we speak. And it seems that it's around this time that there are always new news stories, events, things happening there. We'll find out. Is Israel planning a ground invasion? I think they are. I think it's simply a question of when. And I think it could be imminent, but I also think it could be weeks away. I'm sorry, that's very, I'm being very non-committal, but I think ultimately they are going to go in on the ground. I just think it's a case where they may want to soften the ground a little more ahead of it. I think they might have another week or two of bombing and, further trying to disrupt Hezbollah's leadership, their chain of command, their ability to communicate. Goodness knows. But the difficult thing is that there is so much propaganda going out there. And you have the Israeli side saying that Hezbollah has been dismantled and that they're in disarray. And likewise, similar type messaging coming from the other side. Don't believe either one. The truth typically will lie somewhere in between. So enjoyed the chat. Thank you, Miss Christie. Thank you, everyone, for the 12 thumbs up. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel and would like to, you're most welcome. 1,050 or so. See if we can get to 1,100. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe eventually, who knows, another year, maybe get up. Who knows? Who knows? This miserable, pathetic channel. No production values. Not asking for your money, not asking to subscribe so that you can get this or that or buy my merch. I don't have any merch. It kills me that YouTube is such an industry. And the only industry I'm interested in, and I didn't do enough of it, though, this time, is sharing the gospel good news of Jesus Christ. Because ultimately, if you're going to navigate what's coming, and there's more coming, well then, get into relationship with Jesus Christ. And the way you do that is, one, by inviting him into your heart, getting down on your knees. And I don't think being on your knees is important, but I think it helps because it gives a physical representation of the condition of your heart, and you have to submit. And being down on your knees is a physical representation of the condition of your heart if you are submitting to Jesus Christ and saying, you know what, I'm a fallen, broken, sinful, horrible creature. Clean me up. Guide me. Take the wheel. So I think it helps to get on your knees and to invite Jesus in. And then what do you do after that? You have to get into his word. And one of the best ways to do that is to look for a faithful Bible-based church that reads out of this book. And even if they don't get everything right, if they're reading this word, if you're getting this word every day, every Sunday anyway, and they'll have Bible studies quite often, churches, and you can get into relationship with Jesus and let him take the wheel, invite his Holy Spirit, invite the Holy Spirit in to guide you. And you'll be better equipped, you will be equipped to navigate. And it's going to sound very unchristian what I'm about to say, but they're just words. You'll be able to navigate the shitstorm that's coming. I know that sounds ironic to be professing Christ so much and then to say a word like storm, but I'll end it by saying, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. And we'll talk to you again in a night or two. We'll see what happens on the world. Good night, everyone. Thanks, Danny.